If you're watching this video right now, I can safely assume that solitude is something that you think is important, or at least something that you want to grow in your life. But I think for many of us, the question becomes, how do we get started? Like, what are just the practical steps to really pursuing solitude? Well, in this video, I'm going to lay out from you some real practical strategies for making some headway in this area of solitude in your own life. And I'm also going to give some real life examples of what I've experienced as I've engaged in some longer periods of solitude. All right, so the best piece of advice that I can offer for someone who is wanting to pursue solitude is that you need to be intentional. Solitude is a challenging thing to pursue and to achieve in any sense in the culture that we live in. And so unless we can take time to be intentional in our pursuit of it, honestly, it probably won't happen. But what does that look like? What does it look like to actually be intentional? Well, I want to break down 3 different areas that you need to consider in order to be intentional with solitude. The first area is when. Figure out when you are really going to pursue this. Now, if you've watched a previous video I did on the balance between community and solitude, I spoke on this briefly, but really when we're looking at the when, we need to look at frequency and duration. And we need to understand that solitude is something that's achieved in different levels. There's a daily level where we should be getting alone with God. There's probably like a weekly-ish sort of rhythm that would be really healthy for us to block out a few hours to go be alone and to be with the Lord. I like to think of monthly or maybe even quarterly type rhythms where that's like an overnight retreat or something that has a little bit of a longer span. And then there's sort of like the annual, like I'm going to get away for a few days and just connect with the Lord and kind of wipe the slate clean. So that might be a little bit too much to kind of process and think through right now. So this is what I would suggest. If you're just getting started with this, figure out a daily rhythm and a weekly rhythm to really pursue this thing of solitude. If you function best in the morning and you're able to wake up early, that's a great time to really block out some time to be alone and connect with the Lord. If you're a night owl and everyone's already asleep, that's another really great opportunity to be alone by yourself. And then when it comes to the weekly rhythm that I've talked about with solitude, I often find that Fridays are a really good day. It's kind of like the end of the week for most people. We're kind of coming off of the big push of what the week has been, and it just feels like it brings a really good space to be able to quiet ourselves and to be able to get alone and be by ourselves and be with the Lord. All right, the second key to practically pursuing solitude is to find a space for it. Figure out the where you are going to really engage in solitude. I personally prefer the outdoors, but some people, it might actually be alone in your house, in a special room with a cup of coffee, whatever it looks like. What you're looking for here is a place that is free of distractions, free of most noise, and is a place where you're not going to be interrupted regularly. Now, the final thing to consider in this practical guide of pursuing solitude is one that's often overlooked, and that is the what. What are you actually going to do when you get alone? I think some people get the wrong idea of what solitude is actually meant to be. I think that there's this misconception that when you're alone, you're supposed to just be bored out of your mind, not really doing anything, and in some way, that's supposed to be good for your soul and connect you closer to God. Now, there are ways, specifically like with biblical meditation, in which I think really dialing down a lot of the noise inside of ourselves is powerful, but I also want to say that the times alone in solitude should not be boring. They should be life-giving. They should be something that you are looking forward to doing. And so in order to do that, you need to kind of come up with a rough plan on what you're going to do. If you're going to go on a hike, what does that hike look like? Are you just going to kind of walk aimlessly the whole time? Are you going to, maybe listen to the Bible on audio? Maybe you'll designate like a time where, hey, I really want to pray for this long, or I really want to chew on this verse as I'm walking. Whatever it is, I think having a rough plan of what you're going to do as you enter the place of solitude makes it far more achievable. So, with the practical guidelines of preparing for solitude out of the way, I want to let you know what you should expect. This progression that I'm about to reveal to you comes from really just noticing what was going on inside of myself in my own times of solitude. Now, this normally doesn't happen in short little bits, so like on a daily basis, I'm not feeling the different emotions that I'm about to explain to you. But if you're doing anything from a few hours to longer, I really know that this is something that really begins to kind of sink in. And so this process or this progression that I'm about to share, I think isn't just something that I feel, but is fairly common to the human race. So when you first kick off your time of solitude, if you're anything like me, you're kind of in this honeymoon experience. You're excited. You're so happy to be away. You're so happy to be alone, away from distractions. You're anticipating all the great ways that you're going to connect with the Lord and how wonderful the whole experience is going to be. But just like a honeymoon in a marriage, that doesn't last very long. And soon, what I have realized is that I go through this process of detox. Now, I'm not talking about detox from alcohol or drugs. What I'm talking about is detox from the stimulus that I am engaged in on a daily basis. All the ways in which technology and my relationships and my responsibilities, all those things, the way that that stirs up something inside of me, it creates this heightened level of stress and pressure that I'm kind of always feeling. And when I'm away from that, I begin to realize that I'm kind of detoxing from all of that. But once I come to that place where I feel like I've detoxed, I come to this level of acceptance. Like I said, this is for a longer stint of time alone with God, but there's a time where I realize, like, okay, I might not always love the things that I'm feeling inside right now, but I think I've gotten to a place where I realize that this is what I'm doing right now. I'm spending time in silence. I'm spending time in solitude. I accept this, and it's almost like a re-embracing of what you set out to do originally. And once I hit that place of acceptance, I begin to get these feelings of gratitude that often come to the surface. And this is really where a lot of the fruit, I think, begins to happen. The whole process is fruitful. You can't just jump right to the gratitude piece. I think you have to go through these different steps. But when you arrive at that gratitude piece, that's where you really can begin to experience the real rewards of what solitude brings. Now, I wish I could say that once you experience gratitude, you're just good until the end of the time that you're supposed to be spending in solitude, but that's usually not what happens. Honestly, I see things kind of like recycle. What ends up happening is after a period of gratitude, I start to feel kind of the pain and withdrawal of not being connected to the internet and attached to a device and talking to people and all these other ways that I engage. And I kind of go through that detox period again, and I have to walk through acceptance, and then I experience gratitude again. And it kind of is just a continual process of that cycle. And over time, I've noticed that for myself, it's gotten easier. But if you're just starting out with solitude, I want to encourage you, don't give up too early. The detox period is the point where you really want to give up because it feels painful. You're not being numbed. You're not coping with different things with your responsibilities and with technology and with distractions of social media and all that stuff. You're actually having to face some of this stuff. If you can hold the storm while you're in that detox period, I do believe that you'll experience that acceptance and gratitude, which really brings about the full reward of this thing called solitude.